Hey, look at me. Are you all right? You're scaring me. Please answer me.
The moment I saw my always composed boss sitting in his car, tears streaming down his face while his daughter tried to comfort him, I knew my life was about to change forever. What happened next would test the boundaries between professional and personal relationships in ways I never imagined possible. If you've ever witnessed someone's walls come crumbling down in their most vulnerable moment, hit that like button. And if you want more stories that explore the unexpected connections that shape our lives, subscribe to the channel now. I've always been the first to arrive at the office. It's a habit I developed early in my career. Something about the quiet morning hours before the chaos of the workday begins helps me center myself. That Wednesday morning seemed no different as I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of Meridian Technologies at 7:15 a.m. The only other car there was a sleek black Audi I recognized as belonging to my boss, Daniel Harrington. Daniel was the chief operations officer at Meridian, and while he occasionally arrived early, it was unusual to see his car at this hour. As I parked a few spaces away, I noticed something odd. The car was running, but Daniel wasn't getting out. I grabbed my coffee and laptop bag, planning to walk past with a quick wave. But as I approached, I realized something was wrong. Through the window, I could see Daniel with his head resting against the steering wheel. Beside him in the passenger seat was his daughter, Emma, a sweet 9-year-old with her father's dark curls and serious eyes. She was patting his shoulder awkwardly, her small face pinched with concern. I hesitated, unsure whether to intrude on what was clearly a private moment. But then Emma looked up and saw me. Relief washed over her face as she rolled down the window. "Ms. Olivia. Can you help? Dad's really sad." Daniel's head snapped up at the sound of his daughter's voice. His eyes were red-rimmed, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. When he saw me standing there, he quickly wiped at his face, but it was too late. I'd already seen the tears. "Emma, please," he said quietly, but the damage was done. "I'm sorry," I said, taking a step back. "I didn't mean to intrude." Daniel took a deep breath, composing himself with visible effort. "It's fine, Olivia. Just a rough morning." Emma, however, had other ideas. "Dad's date for my school's father-daughter dance canceled on him. It was supposed to be Aunt Claire, but she got sick. Now we can't go, and it's tonight, and I already told everyone at school that I was going." The pain in Daniel's eyes was unmistakable. I knew from office conversations that he'd been raising Emma alone since his wife died from cancer 3 years ago. He rarely talked about his personal life, but it was common knowledge that he devoted himself to being both mother and father to his daughter. "Emma, please stop," Daniel said gently. "Ms. Reynolds doesn't need to hear about our problems." But Emma continued, her words tumbling out in a rush of childish distress. "It's the biggest dance of the year, and you need a partner because that's the rules. All the dads bring a mom or an aunt or someone, and now we can't go, and I have my special dress and everything." I stood there awkwardly, clutching my coffee cup, unsure what to say. Daniel looked mortified, but beneath that was something worse, the look of a parent who feels they've failed their child. Then, something unexpected happened. Daniel looked up at me, vulnerability naked in his eyes, and said words I never thought I'd hear from my stern, professional boss. "Olivia, do you want to be my date today?" The moment hung between us, fragile and charged with implications. Before I could even process what was happening, Emma was bouncing in her seat. "Yes. Ms. Olivia can be your date. Please, please, please." Daniel immediately backtracked. "I'm so sorry. That was completely inappropriate. Please forget I said anything." But I couldn't forget. In that moment, I didn't see my boss, the man who critiqued my quarterly reports and led executive meetings with intimidating precision. I saw a father desperate not to disappoint his daughter. And something inside me responded to that desperation. "What time is the dance?" I heard myself asking. Daniel blinked in surprise. You can't be serious. I am. What time? 7 o'clock. But Olivia, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. I surprised myself with my decisiveness. I don't have plans tonight, and it sounds like Emma really wants to go to this dance. Emma's face lit up like a sunrise. Really? You'll come with us? I nodded, smiling at her enthusiasm. Really? But I'll need to go home and find something appropriate to wear after work. Daniel was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with something else. Confusion, perhaps. Or wonder. Thank you, he said simply. This means more than you know. I nodded, suddenly feeling awkward about the whole situation. I should get inside and start on those reports you wanted. Of course. Daniel seemed to remember himself, straightening his tie. I'll be in shortly. As I walked away, I heard Emma's excited chatter through the still open window. Dad, Ms. Olivia is so pretty. She's going to look amazing at the dance. I smiled to myself, but as I entered the building, reality began to sink in. What had I just agreed to? Going to a school dance with my boss, the man who determined my performance reviews and potential promotions, was crossing a line I'd always been careful to maintain. The professional boundary between us had always been clear and comfortable. Now I was voluntarily blurring it. But the image of Daniel's tear-streaked face and Emma's hopeful eyes stayed with me. Sometimes, I reasoned, being human had to take precedence over being professional. Little did I know that this one impulsive decision would set in motion events that would change both our lives forever. The workday passed in a blur of awkward encounters. Daniel and I maintained our usual professional demeanor, but there was a new undercurrent to our interactions. When he stopped by my desk to discuss a client proposal, his "thank you" carried a weight that had nothing to do with business. When we passed in the hallway, his eyes held questions neither of us could articulate. By 5 o'clock, my stomach was in knots. I rushed home to my apartment, tearing through my closet for something appropriate to wear to a father-daughter dance. What was the protocol for such an event? I didn't want to be underdressed, but I also didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. This wasn't a date, after all. It was, what, exactly? A favor for a colleague? A rescue mission for a child's happiness? I finally settled on a knee-length navy blue dress with a modest neckline and three-quarter sleeves. Elegant but not overly formal. I curled my hair, applied light makeup, and was just fastening a simple silver necklace when my doorbell rang at 6:30. Daniel stood in the hallway, transformed from the disheveled man I'd seen that morning. He wore a charcoal gray suit with a pale blue tie that brought out the color of his eyes. Emma stood beside him in a pink dress with a tulle skirt, her dark curls tamed into a neat bun adorned with tiny flowers. "You look beautiful," Daniel said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean, thank you again for doing this." "You both clean up nicely," I replied with a smile, trying to ease the tension. "Emma, I love your dress." Emma beamed, twirling to show off the full effect. "Dad helped me pick it out. He said it was the kind of dress Mom would have loved." A shadow crossed Daniel's face at the mention of his late wife, but he quickly masked it with a smile. "We should get going. We don't want to be late." The drive to Emma's school was filled with her excited chatter about her friends, her teachers, and all the activities planned for the dance. Daniel and I exchanged occasional glances in the rearview mirror as Emma spoke from the back seat, each of us silently acknowledging the strangeness of our situation. When we arrived at the elementary school gymnasium, it had been transformed with twinkling lights, paper lanterns, and a banner proclaiming "Daddy's Little Princess Ball." Dozens of fathers in suits stood proudly beside their daughters in party dresses, accompanied by women who were presumably mothers, aunts, or family friends. As we walked in, I felt a moment of panic. What was my role here? How should I introduce myself if anyone asked? Daniel seemed to sense my discomfort and gently placed his hand at the small of my back, guiding me through the entrance. "Just be yourself," he murmured. "You're already saving the day just by being here." A woman with a clipboard greeted us at the door. "Name, please?" "Harrington," Daniel replied. "Daniel and Emma." The woman checked her list. "And your guest?" There was a brief pause before Daniel said, "This is Olivia Reynolds." The woman smiled warmly. "Welcome. Please help yourselves to refreshments, and the photographer is set up in the corner for family portraits." Family portraits. The words hung in the air between us as we moved into the gymnasium. I wasn't family. I was an employee who had stumbled into a situation far more intimate than I'd anticipated. Emma, oblivious to our discomfort, tugged at Daniel's hand. "Dad, can we get our picture taken first? Before my hair gets messed up from dancing?" Daniel looked at me questioningly. I nodded, trying to appear more comfortable than I felt. The photographer positioned us against a backdrop of fairy lights and artificial cherry blossoms. "Dad in the middle," he instructed, with the ladies on either side. Daniel stood stiffly between Emma and me, his posture betraying his discomfort. The photographer frowned. "Relax, folks. This is supposed to be fun. Mom, maybe put your hand on Dad's arm." I froze at being called Mom, but before I could correct him, Emma piped up. "She's not my mom. My mom died. Ms. Olivia works with my dad." The photographer's face fell. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have assumed." "It's okay," Emma said with the straightforward resilience of children. "My mom's in heaven, but Dad says she watches over us. And Ms. Olivia is really nice. She's helping us tonight because Dad was crying this morning." Daniel looked mortified. "Emma, please." I quickly placed my hand on Daniel's arm as the photographer had suggested, hoping to move past the awkward moment. "Let's take that picture, shall we?" The photographer nodded gratefully and counted down. 1, 2, 3, smile. The flash went off, capturing a moment of forced smiles and uncomfortable postures that surely reflected the strangeness of our arrangement. As we moved away from the photo area, Daniel leaned close to me. "I'm sorry about that. And about Emma's directness." "Don't apologize," I said. "She's 9. And she's just being honest." "Still, He was interrupted by a woman's voice calling his name. We turned to see an elegantly dressed couple approaching us, the woman waving enthusiastically. "Daniel. We were hoping to see you tonight. Emma mentioned the dance in class yesterday." Daniel's posture stiffened slightly, but his smile remained in place. "Patricia, Robert, good to see you both." Patricia's gaze shifted to me, curiosity evident in her expression. "And who's this?" Before Daniel could respond, Emma jumped in. "This is Ms. Olivia. She works with my dad. Aunt Claire was supposed to come but she got sick, so Ms. Olivia saved us because Dad was crying in the car this morning." I felt Daniel tense beside me as Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "Oh. Well, that's wonderful of you to step in." "Olivia is my executive assistant," Daniel explained, his voice carefully neutral. "She very kindly agreed to help us out on short notice." Patricia's smile took on a knowing quality that made me uncomfortable. "How nice. It's about time you had someone in your life, Daniel. It's been 3 years since Jennifer passed." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Olivia and I work together, Patricia. This isn't a date." "Of course not," Patricia said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe him. "Well, we should find our table." "Lovely to meet you, Olivia." As they walked away, I could feel the tension radiating from Daniel. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. Patricia was Jennifer's friend. She's been trying to set me up with various women since the 1-year anniversary of Jennifer's death. "It's fine," I assured him, though the encounter had left me feeling exposed. People will think what they want to think. Dad, can we dance now? Emma asked, tugging at his sleeve. They're playing my favorite song. Daniel's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. Of course, princess. He turned to me. Will you be okay for a few minutes? I nodded, relieved to have a moment to collect myself. Go. Have fun with your daughter. That's why we're here. As Daniel led Emma to the dance floor, I made my way to the refreshment table, pouring myself a cup of punch that I suspected had been designed to appeal to 9-year-old palates. It was sweet enough to make my teeth hurt, but I sipped it anyway, watching Daniel and Emma from across the room. He had lifted her to stand on his shoes, and they were moving awkwardly but joyfully to the music. Emma's face was alight with happiness, and Daniel was looking at her with such love that it made my chest ache. In that moment, I could see what a devoted father he was, so different from the stern, demanding boss I knew at work. First time at one of these? I turned to find a woman about my age standing beside me, her own cup of punch in hand. Is it that obvious? I asked with a small laugh. She smiled. Only because you have that deer-in-headlights look I had at my first daddy-daughter dance. I'm Grace, by the way. My stepdaughter Lily is the one in the green dress over there. I followed her gaze to a girl dancing with a tall man in a blue suit. I'm Olivia. And I'm not. I mean, Emma isn't my daughter. I work with her father. Grace nodded, unfazed. Blended families come in all forms these days. Lily's mom is deployed overseas, so I've been filling in at these events for the past year. It's not really the same situation, I began, but Grace waved her hand dismissively. The kids don't care about the details. They just want someone who cares enough to show up. She nodded toward the dance floor, where Emma was now giggling as Daniel twirled her. And from the way that little girl is smiling, you showing up meant the world to her. Before I could respond, the music changed to a slower song, and the MC's voice came over the speakers. Alright, daddies and daughters, this one's for you. And why don't we invite all our special guests to join in? Moms, stepmoms, aunts, grandmas, everyone who helps make these girls feel loved, come on out to the dance floor. Grace nudged me. That's our cue. Oh, I don't think. But Emma was already running toward me, her face flushed with excitement. Ms. Olivia. You have to dance with us. The man said so. She grabbed my hand, pulling me toward where Daniel stood at the edge of the dance floor. He looked as uncertain as I felt, but there was something else in his expression too, a warmth I wasn't used to seeing directed at me. You don't have to, he said quietly as Emma continued to tug at my hand. It's okay, I replied, allowing myself to be led onto the dance floor. I'm already in this deep. Emma positioned us with determination, placing my hand in Daniel's and then wrapping her arms around both our waists as best she could with her small reach. We have to dance in a circle, she instructed seriously. That's how the Anderson family does it, and Lily says it's the right way. Daniel's hand was warm in mine, his other arm around his daughter's shoulders. I completed the circle by placing my free arm around Emma, and we began to sway awkwardly to the music. Thank you, Daniel said softly, his eyes meeting mine over Emma's head. Not just for coming tonight, but for how you handled everything. Emma hasn't been this excited about an event since before Jennifer got sick. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. At work, our interactions were always professional, focused on tasks and goals. This glimpse of his personal gratitude felt intimate in a way that made my heart beat faster. I'm glad I could help, I said, meaning it. Emma is a wonderful girl. You've done an amazing job with her. A shadow crossed his face. I try. But there are so many moments when I know Jennifer would have handled things better. Moments like today, when I couldn't find a solution and ended up crying in my car while my daughter tried to comfort me. That doesn't make you a bad father, I said firmly. It makes you human. Emma looked up at us. Are you talking about Mom? Daniel nodded. I was just telling Ms. Olivia how much your mom would have loved to see you tonight. You look so beautiful in your dress. Emma considered this, her young face solemn. I think Mom would be happy that Ms. Olivia came with us. She always said we should help people when they're sad, and Ms. Olivia helped us when we were sad. The simple wisdom of her statement hung in the air between us as we continued to sway to the music. In that moment, something shifted, a subtle realignment of how I saw Daniel, not just as my boss but as a man doing his best in impossible circumstances. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of activity. Emma introduced me to her friends, proudly explaining that I worked with her dad, in a big office with computers. We participated in a father-daughter craft activity where I helped Emma glue sequins onto a picture frame while Daniel held it steady. We ate cupcakes with too much frosting and drank more of the toothachingly sweet punch. By the time the dance ended at 9 o'clock, Emma was yawning despite her protests that she wasn't tired at all. I think someone's ready for bed, Daniel said, gently wiping a smudge of frosting from his daughter's cheek. Can Ms. Olivia come home with us? Emma asked sleepily. She could read me a story. Daniel and I exchanged glances, both of us recognizing the boundary that would cross. Ms. Olivia has her own home to go to, Daniel explained. And you'll see her at the office sometime when you visit me at work. Emma looked disappointed but nodded. Okay. But can she come to my ballet recital next month? I'm going to be a butterfly. Daniel looked at me apologetically. Emma, we can't keep asking Ms. Olivia to attend your events. She was very kind to help us tonight, but I'd love to come, I heard myself say, surprising both Daniel and myself. If that's okay with your dad, of course. Daniel's expression was unreadable for a moment before he nodded. We'll put it on the calendar. The drive back to my apartment was quiet, with Emma falling asleep in the back seat within minutes. When Daniel pulled up in front of my building, he turned off the engine. I'll walk you to your door, he said, his voice low to avoid waking Emma. You don't have to. Emma's asleep, Anne. Please. It's the least I can do after everything tonight. I nodded, and we both got out of the car, Daniel checking that Emma was still sleeping soundly before we walked to the entrance of my building. At my door, I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how this scene might look to an observer, a man in a suit walking a woman in a dress to her door after an evening out. But we weren't on a date. He was my boss. This was a favor that had gotten complicated. Thank you again, Daniel said, his voice soft in the quiet hallway. What you did for Emma tonight. I don't have words. It was my pleasure, I replied honestly. She's a special girl. Daniel nodded, his eyes holding mine. Olivia, about work tomorrow. We can go back to normal, I assured him quickly. This doesn't have to change anything professionally. He studied my face for a moment. Is that what you want? To pretend tonight never happened? The question caught me off guard. Did I want to pretend it never happened? The evening had shown me a side of Daniel I'd never seen before, vulnerable, loving, human in a way he never appeared at the office. And something about that glimpse behind his professional facade had touched me in unexpected ways. I don't think we can pretend it never happened, I said carefully. But we can be professional about it. Daniel nodded slowly. Professional. Of course. He hesitated, then added, but I meant what I said about Emma's recital. She'd love for you to be there, and so would I. Not as my executive assistant, but as a friend. The word friend hung between us, laden with implications neither of us was ready to explore. I'd like that, I said finally. Daniel smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. Good. Well, I should get Emma home to bed. Of course. He took a step back, then paused. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Daniel. It was the first time I'd called him by his first name outside of the office, and the sound of it seemed to linger in the air between us as he turned and walked away. The next morning at work was strange. Daniel nodded to me professionally as he passed my desk, but there was a new awareness between us, knowledge of how his daughter's hair smelled after a night of dancing, the way his hand had felt in mine, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd thanked me at my door. We didn't speak about the dance, but twice I caught him looking at me when he thought I wouldn't notice. And when he called me into his office to discuss the quarterly reports, there was a moment when our fingers brushed as I handed him a folder, and neither of us acknowledged the jolt of awareness that passed between us. Days turned into weeks, and we settled into a new normal. At work, we maintained our professional relationship, but there were small changes: a coffee left on my desk in the morning, a genuine, "How are you?" that waited for a real answer, the occasional mention of Emma and her activities. True to my word, I attended Emma's ballet recital, sitting beside Daniel as his daughter fluttered across the stage in butterfly wings. Afterward, he invited me to join them for ice cream, and I found myself laughing with Emma as she described the backstage drama of her fellow butterflies. It became a pattern: professional at work, cautiously friendly outside of it. Emma's soccer games, a school science fair, a Sunday afternoon at the park when we happened to run into each other. Each encounter was explained away as coincidence or Emma's desire to see me, but we both knew something was changing between us. Daniel smiled slightly. "Then you'll have a great position in marketing, and I'll have confirmation that I should focus on being a father and a COO rather than trying to date again." I considered his words, weighing the professional risk against the possibility that had been growing in my mind over the past 2 months. "Okay," I said finally. "Dinner. But I'm not agreeing to the transfer yet. Let's see how dinner goes first." His smile widened. "That's fair. 7 o'clock?" I nodded, already wondering what I would wear and what we would talk about without Emma or work as our buffer. Dinner was awkward at first. We sat across from each other at a small Italian restaurant, suddenly aware of all the ways this was different from our previous encounters. No Emma to fill the silences with chatter. No work topics to fall back on. Just two adults trying to navigate the transition from professional to personal. "This is strange, isn't it?" Daniel said finally, after our stilted conversation about the restaurant's decor had faded into uncomfortable silence. I laughed, relieved that he'd acknowledged it. "Extremely strange. I keep waiting for you to ask me about the Henderson account." He smiled, relaxing visibly. "And I keep expecting you to hand me a folder of documents to review." "We're terrible at this," I observed. "Completely awful," he agreed. "Maybe we should talk about what we know works." "Work and Emma?" He shook his head. "No. That moment in the school gymnasium when you danced with us. That worked. It felt right." The honesty in his voice broke through the awkwardness between us. "It did," I admitted. "Even though it shouldn't have. You're my boss. And you're my executive assistant. But you're also the woman who saved my daughter from disappointment. The woman who looked at me at my lowest moment and didn't see weakness, but humanity." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "I can find another executive assistant, Olivia. But I don't think I can find another you." The sincerity in his eyes made my breath catch. "What about Emma? Have you thought about how this could affect her?" Daniel's expression softened. "Emma adores you. She asks about you constantly. But you're right to be concerned. She's the most important person in my life, and any relationship I pursue has to be right for her too. And if it doesn't work out between us? If we try this and it ends badly?" He considered this seriously. "Then we handle it like adults. We make sure Emma understands that sometimes relationships change, but that doesn't mean anyone stops caring about her." His thoughtfulness reassured me. This wasn't a man making an impulsive decision. He had considered the implications for everyone involved. I'm scared, I admitted. Not just of the professional complications, but of how I feel when I'm with you. It's intense. Unexpected. Daniel's fingers entwined with mine. I'm scared too. I haven't felt this way since Jennifer. I didn't think I would ever feel this way again. Tell me about her, I said softly. About Jennifer. Most men might have been put off by the request, but Daniel seemed to understand my need to acknowledge the woman who had been such an important part of his life. She was extraordinary, he said, his voice warm with memory. Brilliant, compassionate, stubborn in the best possible way. She fought her cancer the same way she fought for everything she believed in, with determination and grace. As he spoke about Jennifer, I saw the depth of his capacity for love, and it moved me rather than intimidated me. This was a man who knew how to cherish a partner, how to build a life with someone. She would have liked you, he said finally. Your kindness to Emma, your willingness to step into an uncomfortable situation to help someone else, those are qualities Jennifer valued highly. Tears pricked at my eyes. Thank you for telling me about her. Daniel squeezed my hand. Thank you for asking. Most people avoid mentioning her name, as if talking about her will somehow break me. She'll always be part of your life, part of Emma's life, I said. That's not something to avoid or erase. Something in Daniel's expression shifted, a deepening of the connection between us. You're remarkable, Olivia Reynolds. The rest of dinner flowed more naturally. We discovered shared interests in historical documentaries and obscure indie bands. We debated the merits of science fiction versus fantasy literature. We laughed about office politics and shared stories from our college days. By the time he walked me to my door, the awkwardness had been replaced by a comfortable familiarity tinged with new awareness. I'd like to do this again, Daniel said, standing close enough that I could smell his cologne. I'd like that too, I replied. But we should talk about work. About whether I should transfer to marketing. Daniel nodded. We can discuss it tomorrow. Or the next day. Or whenever you're ready. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to step back if I wanted to. But I didn't want to. His lips met mine in a gentle kiss that held promise rather than demand. When he pulled away, his eyes were warm. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Daniel. As I watched him walk away, I knew that whatever happened next would be complicated. There would be office gossip, professional adjustments, careful conversations with Emma. But standing there with the memory of his kiss still warm on my lips, I couldn't bring myself to regret the moment I'd found my boss crying in his car and made the impulsive decision to help. 6 months later, I stood in the same elementary school gymnasium, now decorated for the annual spring carnival. Streamers hung from the ceiling, and booths lined the walls offering games and activities for the students and their families. Emma ran up to me, her face painted like a tiger. Olivia. Dad says we can do the cakewalk next, but only if you come too. I smiled, taking her outstretched hand. Lead the way, tiger girl. She pulled me through the crowd to where Daniel stood by the cakewalk circle, his expression softening as he saw us approach. There are my favorite ladies, he said, wrapping an arm around my waist and dropping a kiss on my forehead. The casual affection still gave me a thrill, even after months of dating. We had navigated the transition carefully. I had accepted the transfer to marketing, where I was thriving under Melissa's mentorship. We had introduced the change in our relationship to Emma gradually, starting with family outings that evolved naturally into more intimate moments. There had been challenges, of course. The first time Emma saw Daniel kiss me, she had been confused, then curious, then surprisingly accepting. Does this mean you're Dad's girlfriend now? She had asked directly. Would that be okay with you? I had responded, holding my breath. Emma had considered this seriously. Will you still help me with my science projects and read me stories? Of course. And will Dad still have special daddy-daughter time with just me? Absolutely, Daniel had assured her. Olivia and I both want to make sure you always feel loved and special. Emma had nodded decisively. Then it's okay. But you have to promise not to be mushy all the time. Lily's mom and stepdad are mushy, and it's gross. We had both solemnly promised to keep the mushiness to a minimum, a promise we occasionally broke when Emma wasn't looking. Now, as we circled the cakewalk with dozens of other families, I marveled at how much had changed in 6 months. The woman who had once been so careful about maintaining professional boundaries was now holding hands with her former boss while his daughter danced ahead of them, secure in the knowledge that she was loved. When the music stopped, Emma landed on the number that won her a chocolate cake with rainbow sprinkles. Her triumphant smile as she carried her prize made my heart swell. "Can we share it when we get home?" she asked, looking from Daniel to me. Home. The word hung in the air, full of meaning. We hadn't officially moved in together yet, but I spent most weekends at their house, and more of my belongings had migrated there over time. "Of course we can share it," Daniel said, his eyes meeting mine over Emma's head. "That's what families do." Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed with a stomachache from too much cake, Daniel and I sat on the porch swing in his backyard, a blanket draped over our laps against the spring chill. "She called my apartment Olivia's other house today," I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. Daniel's arm tightened around me. "Is that okay?" I nodded. "It's accurate. I'm hardly ever there anymore." He was quiet for a moment, the swing moving gently beneath us. "You could make it official, you know. Move in. We could turn the guest room into a proper office for you." The offer hung between us, significant but not surprising. We had been moving in this direction for months. "Are you sure it's not too soon?" I asked. "For Emma, I mean." Daniel turned to face me, his expression serious. "Emma adores you. And I." He paused, his eyes holding mine. "I love you, Olivia. I didn't think I would find love again after Jennifer, but then you appeared in that parking lot at exactly the right moment." The words washed over me, both expected and overwhelming. We hadn't said them yet, though the feeling had been growing between us for months. "I love you too," I whispered, the truth of it settling into my bones. "Both of you." He kissed me then, tender and full of promise. When we broke apart, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he said, his voice slightly unsteady. "I talked to Emma about it first. She helped me pick it out." My heart pounded as he opened the box to reveal a delicate ring with a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I'm not asking you to replace Jennifer," he said softly. "No one could ever do that. But I'm asking you to help me build something new, a family that honors the past while embracing the future." He took a deep breath. "Olivia Reynolds, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the man who had gone from my stern boss to the love of my life in the span of a year. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I will." As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about the moment that had started it all, finding him crying in his car, a vulnerable father desperate not to disappoint his daughter. Neither of us could have imagined where that moment would lead. The next morning, Emma bounded into our bedroom and launched herself onto the bed, her eyes immediately finding the ring on my finger. "You said yes," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. "Does this mean you'll be my stepmom for real now?" I hugged her tightly, this precious child who had opened her heart to me. "If that's what you want me to be." Emma pulled back, her expression serious beyond her years. "I want you to be Olivia. The one who helps me with my homework and makes Dad smile again. The one who came to the dance when we needed someone." Daniel's arm wrapped around both of us, creating a circle of warmth. "That's exactly who she is, Em. And who she'll always be." As we sat there together, I realized that sometimes the most important moments in our lives come disguised as ordinary days. A morning in a parking lot. A school dance. A quiet conversation on a porch swing. It's only later that we recognize them as the turning points that changed everything. 6 months after that, I stood in the back of a small chapel, wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Emma stood beside me in her junior bridesmaid dress, practically vibrating with excitement. "Are you nervous?" she whispered, adjusting the flower crown in my hair. I smiled down at her. "A little." "Are you?" She shook her head confidently. "No. This is just making official what we already know, that we're a family." From the wisdom of children, I thought, as the music began to play. Emma walked down the aisle ahead of me, scattering rose petals with dramatic flair. And then it was my turn. Daniel stood at the altar, his eyes finding mine as I began to walk toward him. The love in his gaze made my heart swell. This man who had once been just my boss, who had looked up at me with tears in his eyes and asked if I would be his date, was now about to become my husband. When I reached him, he took my hands in his. "You saved us," he whispered, too low for anyone but me to hear. I shook my head slightly. "We saved each other." As we spoke our vows, Emma stood beside us, her small hand reaching out to rest on our joined ones, a physical representation of the family we had become. Not through blood or obligation, but through choice and love and the courage to reach out in a moment of vulnerability. Later, as we danced at our reception, Emma insisted on recreating our circle dance from the father-daughter event that had started it all. The three of us swayed together, connected by hands and hearts and the journey that had brought us to this moment. "I'm so glad you found Dad crying that day," Emma said, looking up at me with Jennifer's eyes in Daniel's face. Daniel laughed softly. "Not my finest moment." "I disagree," I said, squeezing his hand. "It was the moment you were brave enough to be human. To ask for help when you needed it. And you were brave enough to say yes," he replied. As we continued to dance, surrounded by friends and family celebrating our union, I thought about how life's most beautiful stories often begin in moments of vulnerability. A man crying in his car. A woman offering help. A child bringing them together with her innocent need for both. Sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most perfect endings. Or rather, not endings at all, but beautiful new chapters waiting to be written, one day at a time, together. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button to help others find it too. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us how love can find us in the most unexpected moments. Sometimes the most beautiful relationships begin when we're brave enough to be vulnerable and kind enough to help someone in need.